Evangelii secundum Matteum. Gloria tibi, Domine. On one occasion, Jesus spoke thus: Father, Lord of heaven and earth, to you I offer praise for what you have hidden from the learned and the clever. You have revealed to the merest children. Father, it is true, you have graciously willed it so. Everything has been given over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son but the Father, and no one knows the Father but the Son, and anyone to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and find life burdensome, and I will refresh you. Take my yoke upon your shoulders and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart. Your souls will find rest, for my yoke is easy and my burden light. Verbum Domini. Before I begin, there are a couple of announcements. First of all, our intern, Father Ernest, this is his last day with us. And Father, we thank you for coming to do an internship here at EWTN. And we appreciate your presence and what you brought to us these last month or so. And we also welcome you back. Thanks. And we have another announcement. The Franciscan Missionaries of the Eternal Word now have a new postulant. And this is Anthony here. He comes from Pennsylvania. And later today in a private ceremony, he will receive his admission into the Franciscan Missionaries of the Eternal Word. And God willing, in August of next year, he will receive the habit of St. Francis of Assisi. So all of you out there, if you know any young men who are interested or who are discerning a vocation, please send them our way. You know, they could find us at franciscanmissionaries.com or on any of the social media platforms, YouTube, Franciscan Missionaries, Instagram, Franciscan Missionaries, or any of those. So and then as you do that, you go to the website, you get our newsletter, and receive all the latest news and information about the friars, and also by subscribing to our social media channels. And we are happy to bring all this to you and share what God has given us to you. Okay, now moving on. A holy and special day today is this solemnity, this great feast of St. Francis of Assisi. And as we know, St. Francis, he has left his legacy for over 800 years. But when we look deep into the life of Francis of Assisi, before his conversion, we see a young man who was energetic. You know, he wants worldly esteem. You know, he wants to enjoy the glories that the world can give, fame and fortune, a reputation. You know, and in this, he also wants to share it with his family and those whom he loves. And Francis thought that he could achieve this high social status by pursuing knighthood and becoming one. However, these dreams, this vision of him entering into knighthood fell apart. And what we see in St. Francis, who failed. No, and in failing, there was rejection. There was some persecution. And really, he got canceled. And so what we can learn from St. Francis is that in Jesus Christ, there is restoration. And many of us have been rejected. We've been persecuted. We've been canceled. We've been humiliated. Recovering from that can be very difficult. But the example, the witness of St. Francis shows us that with God, restoration is possible. So here is St. Francis of Assisi as a young man. You know, he is just very gregarious and joyous. You know, he is the life of the party. Everybody loves him. He's got a great sense of humor. He's got a very warm personality. You know, and people are just drawn to him. So he's got a group of friends. You know, a good little social network he has. And just, you know, has a reputation of being, you know, very optimistic, you know, and energetic. So people liked him. And, you know, here, as he grew older, you know, as we're saying here, he wants to become a knight. You know, and at this time, receiving knighthood meant an achievement that gave you high social status, but you were counted among those who were considered noble. And if you had this high social status and nobility, you could receive certain privileges. And Francis desired these things. So did his family. So Francis went out on his first journey as a soldier, as a knight, in defending his town, Assisi. And the first battle was against a neighboring city called Perugia. Now, if he's going off to Perugia, that wasn't considered very noble. It was just, okay, here he is, with a group, with an army from Assisi. They're going to go out and fight. Now, if you had received this from a call of knighthood from, say the Pope, or say, you know, the head of a nation, now then that's when you would receive all the privileges and the social status of knighthood. But this was just a small battle. So then here goes Francis with a large battalion from the city, and then they go and fight. Well, in this fighting here, Francis is captured with many others, and he's thrown in a prison. And in these prisons, they did not have the sanitary conditions as they do today. These were like dark dungeon places, you know, and you know, it was, people suffered much. There was no plumbing or heating or air conditioning or any of that. No, there was no beds. They just slept on the floor. No, and it could be quite miserable. And, you know, Francis would experience this darkness in there, you know, and even doubt a little bit. No, I mean, it made you feel like you were lost, like, where's God? But even in that, you know, this Francis, who was this very joyous young man, you know, he would try to make jokes. he would try to liven things up. You know, and with his fellow, soldiers who were in prison with him, you know, he would try to warm up the environment a little bit and the atmosphere. And so then after a time, you know, he was released from jail with the others, and he became a little ill, but then recovered. Well, right at this recovery, now the Pope was calling men to go and defend the church territories in the Holy Land, and so he received this call, and so he signed up, and now this was his way of entering nobility. So here he is on his way, as a knight with the others, shiny armor, and as he's going riding on his horse, he hears the voice of the Lord, and the Lord says, "Would you rather? What is more important? What is better, to serve the master or the servant?" And then, he realizes that it's the master. And so he turns around and goes back to Assisi. Well, this action was a disgrace, because it made it appear that the person who was turning back from a battle was a coward. And so they would immediately, get this reputation of being a failure, of being weak. And so here Francis comes back to his home, and his parents are humiliated. Now they won't have the prestige of nobility and high social status. Now people will talk about them. And this must have hurt the young Francis too. But yet God was doing something here. Then in this time, Francis, well, what does he do? He goes to the Lord, and finds Jesus there in his prayer. And eventually, he realizes that Jesus truly loves him. He sees in Jesus God, but God who so humbles himself, who takes on human flesh, who comes to live among us to save us, for love of us. And so St. Francis is consumed with this love. He doesn't doubt anymore. And now all he wants to do is live for Jesus, live like Jesus, and be like Jesus Christ. But yet Francis, he's still, there's still a lot left there. So here's the start of his conversion experience. He sees in Jesus his poverty, and that's what he embraces, is the poor Jesus who was rich, but became poor, so that we can become rich with the glory of his grace. And so Francis, in recognizing this, gives himself entirely to the Lord and wants to be poor as Jesus is poor in every way. So he's willing to give it all up. He knows what's necessary now. And then, he does this by, of course, selling everything he has. Even going to his father's shop, who was a merchant, and throwing everything out and giving it to the poor. Of course, his father was very upset about this, and in his anger, he shook him up. Even at one point, Francis goes out and he starts building a church, that is the Church of San Damiano, and his father goes and brings him back and locks him in a home prison, and then eventually he's released, and then he renounces everything publicly. His father goes and takes him before the bishop, and there he says, embraces God as his father. Now he has all things, because he's in God, and so he's embraced poverty. And then he takes it even a step further. Here's Francis now, who has some fear, and one of his greatest fears was to see the leper, and so he didn't want to be near the leper. And one day on the road, as he's walking, there is a leper, and so he's frightened. But then he calls upon the Lord, and he goes face to face with the leper, and he gives him a hug and gives him a kiss, and this leper is Jesus. And from that time on, now he will go and care for the lepers, He will even, for a time, live in the leper colony, giving to them and serving them and bandaging their wounds and feeding them. This is why he writes in his testament at the end of his life that God had called him to a life of penance and to the lepers. See, it was here where that his conversion was accelerated because he overcame his fears. He was able to look that in the face, and then there he is, rising in union with the Lord. And as we see in St. Francis, is that he brings Jesus, the gospel, to life in every way he lives. And so, brothers and sisters, look at the legacy of St. Francis. As we can see 800 years later, we see that his impact in education, in medicine, even in ecology and science, and all of this, everybody knows who he is. Well, St. Francis, he didn't want this. Here in embracing poverty, he resolves to live a very simple, poor life. And all he wants is Jesus. That's it. And then look at what God does. And so, brothers and sisters, we're living in this life. And in this life, there are many hardships. And some of those most difficult ones to accept and embrace and move forward from or recover from are those that are most humiliating, like St. Francis. To be a failure, to be rejected, to be talked about and gossiped about, to be canceled. Yes, this hurt Francis, but he didn't stay in that hurt. Yeah, there were some fears he had. Yeah, at one point, as he embraced his poverty, he knew he had to beg for his sustenance. And so there he goes begging from house to house, and then he comes upon a place where his old friends are gathered. And then he, in embarrassment right there, he said, He knows they're there, and so he begins to turn around. But then he says, okay, I got to do this. God has called me to be a beggar, to live this poor life. And he goes and knocks on the door, and he begs. No. And so here in Francis, we see how God gives him the strength to overcome the humiliation, to overcome the shame, and to rise up again in him. And that's what the Lord will do for each and every one of us. But we need to resolve to first look to Jesus. And in looking at Jesus, giving ourselves to him. And then asking him for the strength, the grace, asking that he restore us once again. And then going forward. And going forward means that we got to get out of the self-pity, out of the self-loathing, living in the past, and okay, yeah, I regret this and that and this, whatever. Okay, you did it. You made the mistake. You failed. Get over it. Rise up now. Begin again. St. Francis is an example of someone who can do that. And we can too. No, Jesus is there to meet us when we're down. This is why he fell down on the cross. Not because he sinned, but so that he can meet us there while we're down and to pick us up again. Just like he did for St. Francis of Assisi. And so he will do for us. And so, brothers and sisters, as we learn from the life of St. Francis, that, hey, in giving it all to the Lord. I mean, yeah, some are called to give everything, possessions and all that. It's the way of life that we as religious, as Franciscans embrace. Some are not called to do that. This is why St. Francis had the three orders. The first order for men, for the priests and brothers, the second order for the sisters, and the third order, the secular order, for the laity. He has something for everybody, Francis. I mean, not everybody's called to the way of St. Francis, but what we could learn here is the power of restoration. That God can reverse all things here. And God gives us another chance. This is mercy here. This is the love of the Lord. And this is what he gives us all today. And so now we look to our Holy Father, St. Francis, and may he help us through his intercession to always look to Jesus and to desire to be like Jesus and to live the gospel in any state we're called to live in. God bless you all.